It's interesting that you say that you made a pilot. I remember when we spoke, we talked about the idea that quite often with creative people you're asked to pitch or to do something on spec, and that can be incredibly draining because you're not getting paid to do that. So can you tell me a bit about what they did? So did they look at what you could already do and then decide, okay, that's going to work for this project?
Yeah, but it was all funded by Kate at that point, our client, and so although she had, and this happens quite a lot, where you get a certain level of interest and yet not necessarily money to match that interest, although maybe in other times and times in the future that may start to happen a bit more often. But so you do tend to get lots of encouragement and then quite minimal funds. And things like that, like it's quite an R&D process just to work out how the hell you're going to stitch this thing together. Because we didn't really want a flat we didn't want a flat kind of look. We wanted Dirt Girl to be able to turn and talk to Scrap Boy because she needs to. There's things to do in Dirt Girl world. So that's quite an R&D process, which you can bumble through in the pilot that you certainly can't in the series. Although luckily, you don't have to, well, in this instance, you don't have to work that out until you get there. But yeah, so it's sort of, I think we were discussing earlier that there's a level of risk, I guess, with development. And I was talking with Libby, one of the producers. Basically, I would say there's probably 12 heads of development in Australia. I don't know, someone in the audience may know better than me, but basically it's only really the big production companies that can have a head of development. I mean, it's quite a good job if anyone ever offers you head of development, because it basically means it's quite creative producing, where you look for new ideas or you nurture them. Any more questions?
Yeah, a couple of things. One of the things that's really interesting about Dirt Girl World and relevant here is that it's an international co-production between the ABC and the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. So tell me, what is the process like when you're working with a team that's on the other side of the world?
Yeah, well, I mean, and just to set up why that happened, it kind of happened because it had to happen. Like, basically, Kate was more in charge of the budget because, and we're the animation studio in Australia, but basically Kate came to us and said, look, we can't afford to do it in Australia. It only can work as a co-production, and you see this a lot in film and TV at the moment. Dance Academy, I think, is coming on ABC 1, and then later ABC 3 is German and Australian. And obviously it happens all the time in features and various other areas. So yeah, it had to be a co-production. Then me and Jean were a bit in therapy because that meant that we weren't doing it, or we weren't doing some of it, because we imagined that we would be sort of doing it from beginning to end, like we did the pilot. So luckily we did sort of get to decide what we could do and what we didn't want to do. But although, again, there's co-production points, you can't, so the co-production deals are set up so that you don't treat the Koreans like the Simpsons do. Basically,
Come on, dish some dirt on the Simpsons.
Well, the Simpsons uses South Korea as a studio, but they don't necessarily. There needs to be a creative equity in a co-production deal. You have to have a writer from Canada and a composer in Australia. And it comes down to specific roles: a character designer, an illustrator, a storyboard artist. They all have various points, and if the points don't tally up, then you get in trouble from someone. I don't know who. So
it's enforced collaboration, basically.
It is. It's enforced creative collaboration.
Right.
Yeah. Because you can collaborate with anyone, but there's only co-production treaties with certain countries. But I don't know that much about that. But yeah.
So on the other side of things, so obviously behind the camera there's this need to collaborate and be able to work with a team on the other side of the planet, but you're also writing for an audience that lives in a different culture. Did that make a difference in the way that you put together Dirt Girl World?
Yeah, it was. I mean, yeah, one thing I learnt was always meet people beforehand if possible. I'm sure other people can testify to that. Something about not meeting people and trying to do it all via email and whatnot. Eventually me and Jean both went over there, Jean, for quite an extended time, and various Canadians came to us, but there was a real need for that. I mean, I don't know, you've met Canadians though, they're pretty much like us, aren't they?
Yeah, they're pretty similar.
Yeah, so, with their flags on their bags.
And what kind of, yeah. We're not American, those flags.
Yeah, those flags.
Now, one last point that I wanted to talk to you about. You mentioned MIP TV in the south of France, which sounds like an absolute ordeal. I can't imagine anything worse. But you also rate Kidscreen in New York quite highly. Why are trade shows important when you're trying to get your work out to a big international audience?
Yeah, Kidscreen's a good one because it's a bit more informal and there's more of a dialogue, a bit like this sort of thing, whereas MIP TV and MIPCom are just like this mad sort of market where people are sort of buying and selling TV content. Yeah, I think it's. I think they're kind of good to just show your wares and to get a gauge on what you should pour money into and what shouldn't you, and also how many things should you have, how many irons should you have in the fire? Because I mean, Kate Dirkgirl is a case in point. Really, she was focusing on a project called Hit It, and then suddenly Dirkgirl is the one that's been made. And I find for us also with our short form stuff, we can sort of tout our wares, you know, for graphics and titles and broadcast kind of packaging and that sort of stuff as well, which is quite handy. A lot of the people that go to these things just develop TV shows. So it's kind of good to have a few strings in your bow. Yeah, so I think we might come back to that idea of having a few things in the bottom drawer, just in case you manage to get into an elevator with the right person. We'll come back to that at the end, but thanks, James. No worries.
More video? We've got another video. Let's have a look at it.
I think there's one, maybe one more. I was going to talk over the top of... I won't talk over the top of this, actually.
Going outside, there's adventure waiting out there just for you.